Not too long ago, I took a trip to the southern region of Argentina, known as Patagonia. A place of world renown for its beauty, and because after World War II, it became, at least in the collective imaginary, the go-to refuge for Nazis. Nazis. Okay, we're doing that. Anyways, as we trailed through the pine forest near the mountain village Melikina, we heard stories of Rupert von Haniel, owner of a massive estate there, in which he and his wife built a 15th century-like castle, of Baron George von Waldburgseil, who donated the church bells to the nearest town, San Martín de los Andes, and of Eberhard Hebke, who planted, more than 50 years ago, the very same forest we were traversing through. I'll be honest, I was surprised to learn that, as far as I could find out, none of them had anything to do with the Austrian painter. Though the Argentinian grandpa with a thick German accent joke doesn't come from thin air. German people have been coming here since the 19th century. You can see it in the architecture, memory of decades etched in wood and stone. However, when it comes to those Germans, the ones we like to joke about, and that had everything to do with the Austrian painter, it's no secret that they came here after the war. On July 22nd of 1949, Helmut Gregor arrived at the Buenos Aires port, a mechanic looking to start a new life away from his native land, which was trying to heal from the wounds inflicted upon it by the war. 6 years later, he asked for new documentation under his real name, Joseph Mengele. He lived here, in my city, first in a hotel, and then in Gerhard Malbrank's house, a money mule for the party. That was until Adolf Eichmann received the visit of the Mossad in 1960. Kidnapped and taken to Jerusalem, he was condemned to death. His last words were, "In a short while we'll meet again, gentlemen. Such is the fate of all men. Long live Germany, long live Argentina, long live Austria, I'll never forget you." Not the best case against the jokes, huh? SS Captain Erich Priebke lived not far from where I was staying, in the city of Bariloche, until 1994, when the ABC interviewed him. Interview which spread the logical outrage across the globe. One extradition later, Priebke got life in prison. These fellas are only 3 of around 180 war criminals that arrived here after the war. The exact number is unknown still and might be quite higher. President Juan Domingo Perón was well aware of it all and facilitated the conditions for them to arrive in secret. In fact, Ronald Richter, physicist for the regime, proposed Project Wemul to build Argentina's own nuclear fusion device. Thank God it didn't go through. I don't trust us with that kind of stuff. But they didn't come here just cause. Argentinian-German relations go back a long while before the war, you know that now. What you might not know is that, product of those migratory periods, there sprung across my country a myriad of German colonies, breeding ground for Nazi support outside of Germany in the years leading up to and during World War II. See, to be German is to be ethnically German, whether you are born in Croatia, or Hungary, or the extinct Yugoslavia, or Argentina. If you got German blood, and so do your neighbors, and you speak nothing but German, and every day you hear rose-tinted glasses stories about the old country, then you're going to listen to what message comes from the Vaterland. After the electoral success of the Austrian painter of 1930, the plan was to cement their power by gathering the support of every German person outside of Germany. On April 7th of 1931, in the German cemetery of Buenos Aires, Rudolf Seid and the Landesgruppe Argentinien der NSDAP waved for the first time here the red, white and black swastika flag. A few months before, on February 17th, the Deutsche La Plata Zeitung invited the German people of Argentina to join the group. The newspaper will later become one of the biggest peddlers of propaganda for the regime in my country. General Wilhelm von Foppel had been an instructor for the Argentinian army since 1910. After World War I, Von Foppel came back as counselor between 1921 and 1926, after which he went back to Germany to become an important piece of the regime's foreign machinery. He was the first of many to come. But I'm not as interested in the higher-ups today as I am in the manipulation of everyday people. The breeding ground was already laid. So, how did they take advantage of it? Just as in the Reich, the National Socialist Project entailed a revamping of social, cultural, and biological proportions, a new human. On September 2nd of 1933, the German Argentinian Boy Scouts was born, dutifully incorporated into the local Boy Scouts so as to not awaken suspicions of shilling exclusively for another country. During extracurriculars, boys and girls got used to distinguishing uniforms, marches, meetings, camping trips, songs never lacking the intonation of the Deutschlandlied in honor of the old country, and the instillment of a sense of belonging to a dominating community. Schools did their part in no lesser way. They were rightly focused in the practicality of work, but lacked the ingredient of racial self-conscience that should characterize the people of Germany. A certain degree of alignment was required. The German Association of Teachers had been founded in 1902. In 1934, they were already in bed with Nazi thought. The announcement of foul play began in 1935. The schools broke Argentinian educational sovereignty. Across the country, German school students gave the Sieg Heil every morning to portraits of Hindenburg and Uncle Dolphy alongside our forefathers. They were only able to write and speak in German, and studied straight from Mein Kampf. Teachers got directly hired by the German Ministry of Education and had to pledge allegiance to the mustached uncle in the German embassy. In April of 1938, the government promulgated Decree 3372, thus forbidding Nazi activities in schools and the use of foreign languages other than for religious purposes and the teaching of the language itself. Also, civic instruction, history and geography were to be taught by Argentinian citizens. The measure was quite effective. Dozens of schools shut down or changed practices, but it was not determinant. In December of 1938, it began the publishing of the Junges Volk, a monthly magazine for the German youth. Advertisers were as varied as Bayer and Merck, the German bank, with promises of favorable loans for the adults, Siemens Schuckert, and Agfa, a company part of the IG Farben conglomerate, which provided Cyclone B for the gas chambers of Auschwitz. The publication covered everything from stories, traveling, book reviews, science and technology, and sea and air navigation, both civil and military, all product of Deutsche ingenuity. Photos, illustrations, and articles were taken and written by teachers in alignment. German pride was the general theme. Direct reference to the Third Reich was limited. Figureheads were mentioned as part of a bigger narrative of national glory, beginning with the example set by Frederick the Great. Uncle Dolphy was rarely mentioned, but when he was, it wedged him in the middle of this narrative. A poem written by Will Vesper, entitled Dem Führer, spoke about a leader from amongst our people and praised the customs of the forefathers. The intended impression was that the most capable will rise to the top, independent of the context. As long as one was German, one's present will not be an anchor to reach for a bright future. Biological racism and anti-Semitism had not a strong presence as in other magazines of the time. They will romanticize the resilience of native people. The Aztecs, the Sioux warriors, and the figure of the gaucho, our version of the Wild West cowboy to be concise, were examples to be imitated. Of course, it was not sincere. Junges Volk, as an entity, was very aware of the general sentiment against the Nazi infiltration that had led to the impeachment and muzzle placing of the National Socialist Party of Argentina. Narrative building of the past to frame interpretations of the present were constant in Junges Volk. An example of this is the reported fact that, quote, enemy states had split up, quote, colonial space that the German Empire had, quote, peacefully acquired and had been bereft from in the, quote, Mandate of Peace of Versailles. This is just one example. The German Argentinian Boy Scouts Corps made sure the youngsters got to know the motherland. Between July and August of 1935, there was a meeting of Scouts members from 48 countries in Rheinsberg. They traveled across the Reich, wherein they fraternized with fellow compatriots. Beginning in 1942, Junges Volk pushed for a return to the, quote, endangered country. There was the story of Dirk Maybaum, who after traversing the Atlantic from Buenos Aires to Tenerife in a boat that was not meant to resist such sailing but did so by reason of being a product manufactured in Argentina, decided to return to Germany after almost 20 years because, quote, the motherland could make use of any of her children on the Eastern Front. There was also the story of Wilhelm de Gebel. Born in 1918 in German Samoa, land which his family left after it had been robbed by the Treaty of Versailles, he came to live in Argentina after finishing school. World War II was his calling to the front. His last words were, "What happens to me is irrelevant. The important is that Germany lives." There were many Wilhelm Gebels hailing from my country. Hans Vondrich and Horst Puderbach, to name a few, who left their homeland eager to defend the motherland, came back in coffins, and were not celebrated in fear of retaliation by the suspicious local government. The Third Reich had achieved their goal to replicate Germany across the globe and rip soldiers to invest in their war for 1,000 years' reign. We know how the story ends in the year 1945. But I wonder about these young folks. They were sold 1,000 years Reich as a childhood dream, only to witness the fall of the Vaterland in their young years. What do you do with such pent-up, unrealized imperialist fervor? How many kept that dream for the rest of their lives? Anyways, no, the joke about the Argentinian grandpa with a thick German accent of that kind doesn't come from thin air. And now that I think about it, it is worse than I thought. Well, I hope my German pronunciation was good enough that it was bearable, but not so good that it raised suspicions. I have almost no German blood.